Alright, time for another draft physics video presentation. So good news. The physics guy did get back to me, the professional working physicist. And looks like this should be doable, and so there should be some conversation. Try to keep it pleasant and about the nature of certain beliefs that people have, that physicists have, and the credibility. I don't know, what else can you argue? I mean, that's the appropriate word. How credible are the assertions that physics makes, and how much work, I want to call it that, was done before they jumped to a conclusion? Did they test alternative explanations, or did they just say quarks? They're fun. Strangely fun. Anyway. So, it's good news. I think. Should be. Alright, so I'll have some comments in the spam folder thing, so I figure I'll read a couple of those, even though they're, snarky and insipid. And then maybe we'll do some Miles Mathis on photons, just because it's kind of funny to read. I found it entertaining. Anyway, you had been looking for some physics channels some time ago. Yes, I'm always looking for something interesting that has something to do with real physics. Now, talking head bullshit, where people just bullshit about dark matter or something, no, I'm not interested. I just think I've made that clear. There's a Polish TV program, Astro whatever, where they sell a lot of modern propaganda. Well, why did you think I'd be interested in that? No. Anyway, they go into different observations or places like LHC. So what? I mean, I've seen the LHC. That's what you see. You see it. You don't get any information. You don't see what they see. You don't do any of that. Or just talk about dark matter, gravitational waves, and all the other stuff. Well, why would I be interested in that? I should be back. Gravitational waves and all the other stuff. Again, I just the superficial coverage of something. Look at the big tunnels, and that doesn't mean anything. I want to see some kind of detailed analysis of LIGO. Somebody to ask, well, how do you know how deep the photon went into the mirror? So whatever. 90 plus episodes, from which 20 have English subtitles. So, I mean, really, frankly, even if I spoke Polish, I don't think I'd want to watch it. And obviously I don't. And you think I want to read subtitles on a physics video? You really think that's practical? I mean, maybe you people can do that kind of crap, but to me that really slows things down. You got to pause the video, you got to, it's not practical. I mean, it's not practical, my opinion. Moving pictures and subtitles. It works for a movie, because if you miss half the dialogue, who cares? It's not important. But, physics? No, I don't think so. Anyway, most of the English titles, plus about 20 more with only PL subtitles and auto whatever translate to a quite well edit something. Anyway, no, I mean, I just don't see why you would think this, it's not like there's a lot of, Poland has sent a lot of, big-breasted women into space or something, Should I think that they've got the right answers? That they're doing the, whatever it is, show physics, with more integrity than the rest of the world. I mean, Poland isn't known for integrity, exactly. But anyway, sorry, thank you. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, it's not really what I'm looking for. The other guy did that with this, the Spanish videos, and I'm not saying the videos weren't bad. I did watch one of them, reading the subtitles, but it's just so damn annoying that, it's just not worth the trouble. You claim that the outside edges of the double slit, so this is Marcia Clark, so a cowboy, he dresses in drag often. This is, double slit caused the smaller lobes. Okay, so again, this idea that he can't ever describe what I claim accurately. But anyway, you claim that the outside edges of the double slit, I'm saying that all the surfaces are where the point sources are being created. All the diffraction, all the scatter is what I call it. The scatter of the light takes place at the surfaces. All the surfaces. That's what I said in the videos directly. I drew pictures of it, little lines coming off of the surfaces. That's what I claim. All right, wait a minute. Slit caused the smaller lobes and the inner edges, the inner edges that are further apart. Okay. Let's see. And the inner edges cause the outer envelope. So you sort of had said that backwards, I guess. Which ones are pointing in and which ones are pointing out, I suppose. But I mean, obviously the two are inverted in terms of distances. All there is distance. You can have this much distance apart and this much and this much and much. The more distance you have between the two, that is, the bigger the difference is between the distance of the surfaces, the more dramatic the difference in the pattern. But obviously distance is everything. So if you make the slits really, really small, then there's not much difference between the inside surfaces, the distance, and the distance of the outside surfaces. They almost are the same if you make the slits very, very small. So then you won't have any pattern difference between the two. Duh. Anyway, why do some computations, well, isn't that interesting? Why do some computations to make sure, why not do some computations? Because they've already been done. I mean, look, the math was there. They have even simulators where you can just punch in the numbers, and it's doing the math I'm saying. It's doing the math from the surfaces. The equation already exists. The variable already exists. I don't have to remake the variable. So as long as you're not doing the simplistic math, and you're doing the surface math, why do I need to change anything or demonstrate anything? I'm asserting it as a prediction. Can you find evidence where it isn't true? Now, they could have said this all to us a long time ago, right? I mean, when the physicists are pointing out the pattern, it would have been great if they just told us what is now obvious. That, the inside surfaces, the impediment surfaces are creating the envelope. So you want to make the envelope wider, you make this thing wider. So if you want an envelope with lots of bars in it, okay, then you just make the the impediment bigger, and then you'll have an envelope that has, lots of more stuff in it. So you make it wider, and you'll get more. And if you want less, that is, you want to really spread it out, then you make it smaller. So you make it smaller, you spread it out, the envelope, and you make it wider. And then the only other distance is the outside difference, the outside surfaces. And the outside surfaces, this distance is all that matters. So I can just change this distance, and I can have 20 little bars in here, or I can have 6, or I can have 4, or I can have 3. It just changes how big these little ones are. That's all that gets changed by the outside surfaces. So the outside surfaces do the little stuff, the inside surfaces do the big stuff. Done. Now, where's your evidence that isn't true? Okay, that's my prediction. It seems a falsifiable prediction, so just show the example where that mechanics doesn't hold true. All right. Anyway, some computations to make sure this works out in your favor. Like I said, I don't need to. Oh, that's right, because math is fake. Well, so it's another fake statement, right? Never said math was fake. What I've said is there's equations and like doing this, momentum, P, equals F. That's fake. Okay, they just made that shit up. Frequency isn't momentum. Momentum is your velocity and your mass. Okay, frequency is how frequently something happens, but it's not the same as velocity and mass. And because one circumstance it's the same, probably more than one, but a few incidentally circumstances, like when an electron is stuck to an atom, it takes a certain frequency to free it, doesn't mean that these two things are equal. That's bullshit. Alright. Let's see. Except engineers can manufacture disk readers with some super secret formula like KFC. So what does that mean? The fact that you can code information, you know, by having an algorithm in and an algorithm out. It's just like saying, you know, you can decode your radio messages by just scrambling them and then descrambling them by the same algorithm. So what? What does that have to do with the two-slit experiment and the fact that the outside surfaces are deciding the small pattern and the inside surfaces are creating the big pattern? What does it have to do with that assertion? Oh, that's right. Absolutely nothing. This channel should be blocked by YouTube for terrorizing human brains. No, you should be blocked because you're a troll, you got fake accounts, you use other people's names, you slander people, you're a reckless, stupid slob of a human being, a piece of absolute garbage. You can't do anything honest. You're an insanely, and you are insane, no doubt, dishonest motherfucker. And yeah, if I was the law, there'd be a law against it. Liars suck. Okay, they're the only thing it should be in there. You almost don't need the whole Bill of Rights. All you have to do is say liars suck. Okay, and we are going to punish the sucky, and that would be the simple rule. You don't need 10 commandments. All you gotta be is honest, and you can't do it because you're a piece of suck. Okay, I'm sure he's blocked, but I'll just do it again for the fun of it. Alright, Jack Williams. Okay. What the hell? Whoever that is. Never saw it before. Okay, at 22 minutes. You claim that the detectors... Okay, so these never happen, these detectors. No one's ever detected a photon or detected an electron in flight. Yeah, you can't watch one. Not possible. In the thought experiment, I guess he meant to say, are too numerous to be just noise in the troughs. Oh, okay, so he's now talking about the Veritasium video. So obviously Veritasium, you know, I could just play the video again, but I mean, just for one dope, I'm not going to bother doing that, but I'll draw a picture. So as I had stated, the Veritasium video has an interesting context because I didn't realize he was using the same $7,000 device as the other university that graduates 8 students a year. Anyway, and has a Christian professor. But anyway, alright, so what Veritasium's data showed was, okay, you had the pattern was here, and there was a bunch of noise photons here. So you had a bunch of noise photons below the pattern. And then you had, and it was 50% of the pattern, okay, was this noise block below the pattern. And then you had the pattern, okay, one photon at a time. And again, his little instrument did have a little thing to block one of the slits at a time. So you could block one of the slits, you know. So he could have done this zero thing. He could have proven it. Okay, so just to be fair, let's put these lines all the way down to the noise level. Alright. So the argument is that the physics professors will point to this as the key to quantum mechanics right here. This goes to zero. So, you know, you have 2 slits. You have one slit open, and there's light. There's whatever it is, 25%. And then you open the other slit, and you have another 25%. Right? That's the argument. 25%, 25%. Okay, and that's a fact. And then when you close, when you open both slits, like say, so if you do one slit at a time, 25%. Open the other one, 25%. Then when you open both slits, 0% of the light gets to a certain location. That's the assertion. And it's foundational. It's a foundational assertion. This is why they believe in the woo, is because of this impossibility. How the hell can you have zero light when the two slits are open? If one slit makes 25%, the other slit makes 25%, how can it possibly make 0%? It's impossible. And yes, I'm arguing it. Yes, it is impossible, actually. And if you actually do the experiment, this is what you'll get. So clearly when Veritasium did the video, he actually addressed this very point. And he showed, before he showed the pattern, he showed, look, this is how many cosmic rays are coming in. I'm getting 5 photons a second. Okay, so he showed it. The instrument, he showed it on the film. And it went from like 3 per second to 5 per second to, you know, little numbers like that. This number is 200 a second. Okay, so obviously this noise is not cosmic rays. It's not stuff coming from the outside world. All right, it's coming from inside the experiment. It's not coming from the external universe somewhere. It's coming from inside the experiment. I mean, you people are just so fucking dumb. And you're so arrogant. I mean, to be so stupid, you can't even watch the video carefully enough to see that he checked for how many photons randomly get into the machine. He already did that. Alright. Which, if you paid attention... No, you didn't pay attention. You didn't pay attention. He overtly showed how much noise there was getting into the detector. He showed it. And it wasn't this much noise, retard. Which, if you paid attention, you would know caused by cosmic radiation. So again, he even used the words cosmic rays getting into the device. I mean, too fucking stupid. Are we supposed to just take your word for this? I played his video, okay? So I'm just saying, you're saying Veritasium is too stupid. He's too stupid to get the proper zero result. He's not smart enough to figure out how to do the experiment right. He paid $7,000 for a device, and he's too stupid to read the instructions. What's your argument? Okay. He didn't want to show the actual results. He didn't want that zero to be there, and so he could go, look at that. Isn't that impossible to explain? How the fuck do you explain how opening both slits and you get no photons? How is that possible? Wouldn't you think he'd want to do that? Yeah, he'd want to do that if he could. If he could have gotten the experiment to say it, he would have loved to show it. But he couldn't get it to work. Because it's not really possible. It's just something they made up out of an assumption. They looked at the pattern and they said, oh, look, it's a dark band. Well, it's not really that dark. Okay, it's darker than the light band, but it's not zero. All right. Let's see. Cosmic... Alright, if these cosmic rays are filtered out, you do get the dark band. So that's just a pile of crap. Zero evidence for that. Zero evidence that, again... Well, do I have to repeat it? Again, this is such an overtly stupid and idiotic argument to make, when clearly he already showed us the control. He showed us how many cosmic rays get into the device. And it's much lower than this noise level that he got when he did the experiment. Alright, and he put it in capital letters. You do get. No, you don't. Alright, and besides, it doesn't matter. Isn't that brilliant? It doesn't matter. Yeah, it does matter. It's really important. Little details like that, when your experiment doesn't work, they do matter. And they're the ones you people just couldn't care about because you have an agenda. You want your woo physics to be true. You're all just religious kooks looking for a new formulation of God. You want a mathematical God. You know, it still says you don't have a fucking goddamn horse face and a fat ass. Alright. Anyway. Who loves you? Okay, if cosmic rays are filtered out, you do get the dark bands. Well, that's just prove it. There's no experiment demonstrating that. And besides, it doesn't matter. You wouldn't get any pattern at all if light was not wave-like. So again, just another silly assertion. And what does a wave-like even mean? wave-like. What does that even mean? We know it hits one tiny location, essentially. I mean, tiny, relatively speaking, from our perspective. But it certainly doesn't hit one single electron. That sounds absolutely preposterous. Anyway, this is so stupid. Notice how the difference between the high and low points on the graph is about 150 photons. Yes, and the noise was about 150 photons. Is due to chance alone. What does chance mean? I'm not speculating on some whatever chance means alone. I mean, the argument's pretty simple. There's a certain volume of energy going in a certain form. It has a pattern. Okay, you have photons going in. We could just use little dotted lines. And the idea is the little bits of those little dotted lines are going to different locations. Doesn't mean they're not going somewhere. And the fact is that certain locations you'll rebuild the pattern. You'll rebuild the right pattern at certain locations, and at these locations they'll be out of phase, and out of phase, and out of phase, and out of phase, and those photons won't be visible. So yeah, the truth is, if they did this experiment scientifically, what they do is measure how much light with no slits. So measure how much light hits the area that they're observing, right? And see how many photons hit that area, the total amount that hits that area when they have no slits in the way. How much energy is there? And then do the simple thing of put the experiment in, and what's your total energy hitting the area now? I mean, now it's obviously going to be diverging. It's going to spread over a larger area, but I mean, just make sure you're collecting the substance of it on that area. And I would predict, okay, my prediction is this is a lot less light, like 50% less light than you get when there's no slits in the way. So slits decrease the number of photons by 50%. Might be 30, but I'm just saying. Have you had any evidence this simple experiment was ever done in the history of mankind? I mean, this is cornerstone experiment, nail in the coffin evidence, all this bullshit they say, and they haven't done these simple inquiries. I mean, is that difficult? And especially when you're doing it with single photons, you think they'd do that. Well, send the single photons. You're saying they're single photons. We'll send them to a screen, count them, see how many get there. Now put your slits in and see how many you get. Have they done the experiment? No evidence anybody ever did it. I can't find it. Can you? Alright. Are we supposed to believe this difference of 150 is due to chance alone? Well, of course, everything is due to some sort of real event. Yes, when I roll dice, it's chance alone. Okay, that is the variables of how I rolled the dice that'll decide what dice show up. But I mean, what do you want to say? I mean, we all know that we call a thing chance, and there really isn't chance. There's always inevitable outcomes. The physics is inevitable. It doesn't have any variability in it. There's no room for anything variable by any randomness. There's no real randomness. It doesn't exist. Okay, and in that exact pattern, well, the pattern is completely dictated by the geometry. There's nothing else dictating the pattern. I mean, the only thing that dictates where you will get a photon is the geometry of the straight lines from what you've figured out to be the point sources. So if you have a slit, all you're really saying is, okay, here's my slit, here's my two surfaces. All you're really saying is you know, you could do it this way. You could say one line is longer than the other. I don't know. See, I mean, obviously the center is the same length of line. And then when you go this way, then the two lines have a different length. And then when you go over here, the two lines have a different length. So, but you're really just saying, what's the total length of the lines? So if I just got rid of this and this. All right, so you're just saying, what's this total length? All right, of this. So it's almost like the string argument. You know, you take a string and you move it this way. You really can't do that because the total distance is further. Let's see. I mean, obviously you should be viewing this on an arced screen to be fair, right? To keep the distances the same. So you can understand on an arced screen that it's all going to be the same. And all you're saying is one of these two lines the same length? So if you did it on an arced screen, no, that wouldn't work either. Because it's always going to be the same. No, there'll be different lengths. Okay, so there'll be, yeah, see, you're still stuck with this notch idea. You just have to think of it as the lines being notched. Yeah. And this extra length, this distance decides how big the notches are. So the wider this distance, the wider I make this distance, the smaller I make the notches on these lines. So the more places I can have a phase match. And the wider, the narrower this slit, the bigger the notches are. Okay, and the fewer places where I'm changing the wavelength. And that's all that's controlling the experiment. There's no waves here anywhere. There's no wave. There's straight line vectors. Notice how the difference between, okay, chance alone and the exact pattern. That is like flipping a coin 1,200 times and getting 150 heads in a row, then 150 tails in a row, then 150. So again, it has nothing to do with any kind of impossible odds. Being in phase and being out of phase just has to do with the fact that the notches are on the ruler. And if I move two rulers side by side, I'm not breaking the law of probability because the one lines up with the two. And then I move it some more, and then the one lines up with the three. The fact that I can make the notches line up is not at all mysterious. That they're unmatched, and then they're matched, and they're unmatched, and then they're matched. That's not breaking the rules of probability, you retard. God, you're so stupid. All right, so you can send on. It's nonsense in capital letters. Well, yes, as you've stated it, it's nonsense, but that's not what's happening. It's not some perchance thing. The pieces are there. You either put it back in phase or not in phase. All that matters is the pieces are going everywhere. Pieces of the photon. But you can only see a photon when it's in phase. And so all you're saying is where's it in phase? Where's it out of phase? Where's it in phase? So when the pieces are in phase, they can be rebuilt into a photon. When they're out of phase, they can't. That's simple. Actually do have the answer to your question at 39 minutes. Oh, yeah, I'm sure you do. It's that there isn't two waves in the single slit. All right, so I'm just saying, obviously you can't have interference unless you have two of something, idiot. So whether they're wave functions or whatever you call them, it doesn't matter. They clearly draw them as two waves. So you want to pretend something else is happening, go ahead and pretend it. I'm saying, how do they teach the subject? All right. I and others have explained before the single slit pattern is caused by Huygens principle. Huygens does not divide the slit into two. So this is just more nonsense. What they do is they always contrive a reason. Before they go, they'll say the word Huygens. So here they have a single slit, right? And they'll say, and the Huygens principle, and they do that. Says that this and this cancel, and this cancel, and this cancel, and this, and why did they bisect it in the first place? Why couldn't I just take that fucking line the fuck out of there and just say, well, this and this cancel, and this cancel, and this cancel. What? Why? Because if I did that, I wouldn't have two left over. I'd have nothing left. So that's why they don't do it that way. They just arbitrarily call, I'm going to cut it in half for fun. There's nothing in Huygens that says you cut single slits into two. Nothing. Huygens just means that, their silly theory that there's this wave, right? And the wave is an infinite number of little waves pop out to create the next wave. That's Huygens. Huygens' principle just says, look, each wave is just, the next wave is made out of a million zillion, infinite number actually, of little waves that pop out and make the next wave. That's the Huygens principle. re-fucking-tard. The Huygens principle has nothing in it that says, oh yeah, you bisect a slit in two. So you can make two waves. Yeah, you're so full of shit. It's just amazing that you can type this crap and say this is a rational argument of some kind. There's nothing rational in what you're describing. Nobody draws it the way you're describing it. No one can draw it the way you're describing it. There's no Huygens principle that fucking cuts slits into two. Alright, where each location on the wavefront evolves. Yeah, sure it does. As if it were a point source. Again, an infinite number of point sources in a finite space. So that's their physics. There's an infinite number of things in that finite space. And that's supposed to be credible physics. That's what they're saying. Again, it's just such crap. I mean, they won't just admit they believe in a woo-verse. They're putting infinite numbers of stuff in finite spaces. And I'm not supposed to say that that's a bold assertion? That sounds a little bit like a UFO theory to me. I mean, what evidence you have for this infinity shit? Oh, you have no evidence. Anyway, so that the integral gives the final wave height at each point on the photo paper, wall, whatever you want, to stand for a line on the right side of you drew. So again, it has nothing, the integral has to do with when you're doing, the integral isn't in their stupid little wave math. I mean, their single slit math. They don't bother with the integral. So let's not pretend, because if they do, then they use this distance. They use the slit distance. They don't bisect it. They just use these two surfaces. Asshole. Alright, anyway. In the double slit pattern, you can simplify things. So again, this is just to evade the simple question. The argument is that if you're going to come up with this elaborate mechanics for the single slit, then why aren't you using the same exact mechanics for the double slit? Why aren't you bisecting the slits and creating two waves? Okay, if that works here, why aren't you applying it here? Oh, that's right, because it doesn't work here. Because these two waves won't be in the right place and they won't create the right pattern when they interfere. And the only way it works to have 4 point sources, which does work, but the only way it works is these are the point sources, the surfaces. So I'm right again. Simplify things by making the slit point sources, which is exactly what happened in the Young experiment. So again, the Young experiment didn't even have show the two patterns. Young didn't even know they existed. Young just did this silly thing of saying, look, there's two openings. That means there's two waves. The two waves interfere with each other. And I will not even go anywhere near the single slit because, yeah, how am I going to make two waves interfere with each other when there's only one wave coming out of the slit? It doesn't work. There's no water parallel. The two experiments don't match anymore. It doesn't work. I compare it to water. In this case, it matches. Well, it sort of matches. It matches if you pretend there's no two patterns. But in this, it ain't going to matter. Water doesn't work. Water doesn't create interference. So this is more just fake. You sit there and say, how can you're not consistently applying a principle. You're quite obviously not consistently applying it. And they'll just sit here and keep pretending in denial. They'll just sit here and deny the simple truth. Okay, Young experiments, as you know, and as your viewers should be aware of, the slits do not, in fact, behave as point sources when you make them in the same length as lambda. So again, we have more crap about how it matters how big the slits are. It doesn't matter. It doesn't change the functioning principle. You can make the slit smaller than lambda, bigger than lambda. I mean, all you're guaranteeing is if you make it smaller than lambda, you're guaranteeing no light, frankly, because every single photon gets broken. And in the single slit, you'll get no light because there's no way to reconstruct the photons because you've broken them way too much. But anyway, this whole idea of it, like it somehow matters if I make this slit really, really small versus making the slit real, bigger. It doesn't matter. The same rule applies. This distance, d, is all that's dictating the pattern. So if you want a pattern that's really huge, you know, and you won't even be able to see it on your screen, it's so wide, right? Then yeah, make it really small. And then you won't see this over here. And you won't see this over here. All you'll see is this hump, because you've spread the pattern out so wide. You've made the notches so gigantic that you don't see them anymore. Duh! But it doesn't change the basic rule of what's controlling that. And what's controlling that is this distance. This distance dictates how big your little clump of light will be. How much distance there is between phase and out of phase is dictated by this distance. This distance goes up, the little blocks get smaller. The distance gets smaller, the blocks get bigger. That's it. That's all there is, retard. Alright. And do, in fact, point sources, blah, 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 smaller. But the simplification isn't necessary. This simplification, there's no simplification. You're not accounting for the real pattern. Your math doesn't even accept the fact that these are not gradually on and gradually off bars in the first place. Okay, that they're really just phase matched, phase unmatched. The simple truth is the reason why these are bars of light is because it's really just about the phase. And the phase is either it's close enough or it's too broken. So you're either close enough to being on phase. So right, so let's just say this is phase. And I send another photon is, it's a little bit forward here, a little behind here, and it's matching here. So, it's a little tiny bit out of phase. Well, it still says photon, right? But then when it finally gets to this point, like when it's this far off, and this one matches, and this one matches, well, then it says this isn't a photon. I can't see that. I can't receive that as a photon, so it's not going to be seen. And that's all it's dictating the bars. The bars are basically saying this is enough on phase. This is too off phase, so no photons will be seen. And then it's back on phase again. It's close enough to align. A little bit off, but not too much off. But too much out of alignment, oh, forget it. It ain't happening. Alright, let's see. But this simplification isn't necessary. It is possible to integrate the contribution from both slits. So again, it's not the contribution from both slits, it's the contribution from all the surfaces. That's the actual integral. So that's the one they use for diffraction gradients. The two littlest, the closest, the further away, further away, further away, further away, further away, further away, further away. That's the integral, asshole. Okay, so you end up with an interference pattern where two single slit patterns are interfering with each other as you would expect. Two single slit patterns are interfering with each other. Again, they never draw it that way, so that's just bullshit. So you can say something like that, but it's just bullshit. You're not going to get the two patterned result. You can't get this result. I don't know, anyway, of the bars. Then you can't get the complex two slit pattern. Okay, by using two openings that are tiny. If you use too tiny an opening, you won't get this pattern. Because the two patterns will be too close to each other. The single impediment won't be, these two surfaces won't be enough difference. The difference between this distance and this, so if I have a big impediment and small openings, the distance between this and the distance between this won't be enough of a difference. And all you get is blobs. You don't get the two patterns because you're viewing the pattern. This pattern has more, it's almost the same as that pattern. The two patterns end up being almost the same because the distances are almost the same. You get the complex pattern by making little bars inside. So you obviously have to have a substantial difference in the distances to get the little bars inside the big bar. All you get is big bar inside a big bar, okay, when you have infinitesimally small slits, which nobody uses, by the way. Alright, anyway. So are interfering with each other. Let's see, where the hell was I? Right hand side you drew, we did that. In the double slit we did that. So you end up with an interference pattern where two single slit patterns are interfering with each other as you would expect. They're too small a difference. That is troughs and peaks combine to produce darkness. So again, this is more crap. Just crap. Okay, you have no evidence it's a wave in the first place, and it doesn't go up and down. The light doesn't turn on and off. So this whole wave theory doesn't even work as a practical matter. You can't visualize it as a moving wave, because then the pattern would go on, and then it would go off, and then it would go on and go off. Anyway, or in the case of water, no wave, where the peaks combine, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, this is all just horse shit. It really cannot be made any simpler than this. Yeah, it can. That's the whole point. It's simple geometry of where the phase is on and where the phase is off. It's just matching the notches on the string. If you or your viewers can't follow what I've said, well, what you've said is just more horse shit. You haven't explained how Huygens is consistently applied in the two experiments. If Huygens creates two waves in the single slit, why doesn't it create four waves in the double slit? And if it did create four waves in the double slit, they're in the wrong place. You probably need to stick to simpler, less cognitively demanding subjects. Well, you're the asshole who can't even describe the experiment correctly. And thinks noise. Aren't you the asshole who started with the noise shit? Like wanting to holocaust every living person. So another lie, but whatever. Animal, insect, and plant out of existence for all of eternity. Yeah, well, until you can defend what you're doing as being a good enough song and dance, here you are, just some trolly asshole who can't even get the simple subject of what a wave is and what a straight line is and a ray is. Okay, you can't get that shit right. Why should you exist? What are you doing that's so fucking spectacular, retard? Yeah, that's worth torturing other things for. Yeah, fuck you. You're not worth it. Alright, so these are all the old ones. So, no point. Well, this one's pretty stupid. So, calls himself email or something, right? Gmail? I don't know. So, another troll, spam, liar. So they show up with liar screen names, liar accounts, and then, they're going to tell us the truth. That's the robes the truth tellers always wear, the lie costume. Alright, you remind me of an octopus. You can't defend yourself with claws, strength, or speed. You're the one with you have no balls. That's right. You remind me of an octopus. Ballless. But you have a bag of ink, which makes the water so that you can swim away. You never propose a specific prediction. I mean, it's hilarious. I've made so many predictions. I predict that jamming is a perfectly suitable explanation for the radar experiment, and that you can prove it by just changing the arrangement of the antennas. I certainly predict that gravity never bends any photons, and I predict that there's no waves involved in the two-slit experiment, not a single one. Lots of predictions, asshole. That your model makes, and why that prediction is different than that of the standard model. I predict there are no fucking quarks, there's no neutrinos, there's no gluons, there's no Higgs boson. All of this crap is just misinterpreted data. So you're not being scientific. Well, I'm saying you're not being scientific. You've never proven the Eddington experiment by redoing it, did you? No, even though you had a perfect eclipse, you didn't redo the experiment, and you've never done it from space, what makes you really fucking lame. So you're the one being unscientific. You're making all these declarative statements, and you haven't done any of these experiments. You claim you've done detector experiments, you never did them. How can you bounce a photon off of an electron when a photon is 2,000 atoms wide? I mean, its polarization is wider, by 1,000,000 times than the size of the electron. How could you bounce a photon off of an electron? You haven't even answered that simple question. All right. But you boldly and arrogantly assert without evidence, so I'm showing the evidence. I'm showing that you lack evidence. I'm proving that you don't have experimental data that verifies. I showed you the Veritasium video showing you how it doesn't turn out the way they say it should turn out. It turned out differently. Okay, but you boldly and let's see, and arrogantly assert without evidence that their experiments are problematic for reasons. So I explained to you that there's a fact about mirrors and light. And as far as I know, they haven't been able to overcome this fact. We don't have any super special technology that undoes this fact. That a mirror, when light goes into it, the actual photon has to penetrate the mirror and reflect the light. And each time it's going to go a different place inside the mirror. Inside the mirror, it'll go, like one could just, I hit the first electron. The piece of the photon. See, I mean, the photon, again, I would assert is in pieces, and all the pieces have to hit some part of the mirror, so each piece is going to be hitting a different depth, and that's the fact. So the photon that's reflected is going to be reflected from a different depth into the mirror each time. Maybe 5 atoms worth, which isn't much, but it's still 5 atoms worth is still, it's 3 nanometers. Okay, now the polarization of light is 500 nanometers, true enough. But the fact is that 3 nanometers, when you do this 1,600 times, okay, then 1,600 times 3 starts to add up to a lot of variation, doesn't it? Quite a lot of variation. So how can you say you're measuring 1/10,000th, right, of the distance, the thickness of a proton, right? A proton, all right? Okay, you almost see that, yeah. How can you say you're measuring 1/10,000th of the distance of a proton with a ruler that has such variation in its length? It's, who knows how long the ruler is each time you run an experiment, because the ruler is going to change length based on how deep it goes into the mirror each time. How can you measure that fine with something that coarse? Yeah, that's what I've done. I've asked questions that you can't rationally come up with a good answer for because it's stupid. I've pointed out how the beam splitter can't possibly create 2 equal beams. It's just not theoretically possible. Okay. Amazing. Different than the standard model. Let's see. But you boldly and arrogantly, yes. It's the exact same reasoning. So it's obviously not. I'm for more experiments done more carefully. You're opposed to that. Seems clear the argument, because you won't concede they haven't done enough experiments. You won't concede that they didn't really push this whole Eddington bent by gravity thing. They didn't even, spend the little effort it would take to point one of the thousands of cameras we have up in space right now to point one, next to the sun and look at the black space there and see if they see anything out of place. It's Barry Scheck, when he's bringing up this, when he claims the DNA evidence in the Ojai case is problematic because of the reason, though, are a crazy Christian. So this is just whatever this bullshit is. I found 0 substance in your so-called rational model of reality. Then you're, again, what can I assert except, okay, you don't understand any of these concepts then. You don't have any answers. I mean, you have no way of saying, yes, beam splitters create 2 equal beams. Well, why don't you demonstrate how they do it? Why don't you draw me a picture of how it's possible? Why don't you show me how a mirror reflects light within 1/10,000th of a proton? That each time a photon hits a mirror within 1/10,000th of a proton, it's reflected that perfectly. Yeah, but you can't. All right, anyway. You look like a caveman. Well, you're too gutless to show what you look like, but I'm sure it has something to do with a big fat ass. Okay, and you are the missing link. Goodbye. Oh, so brave of you. Alright, anyways, I'm sure I've already blocked that asshole. This is just, it's all the, it's all the cowboy, all this little Superman, who calls themselves that? So exactly the same comment under a different troll name. I mean, the irony of it, right? Oh, that's what all the truthers do, is that people who are talking the truth have sock accounts and post the same comment on the same video under two different account names. That shows integrity. No, it doesn't. Oh, shit. I don't even know what this screen name is. But anyway, I believe in the beginning there were a thin strip of stretchy material. Okay, then I think we're all done already now, right? Because, yeah, I don't do other tinfoil hat bullshit. And then when I saw this short, fat guy stretched, okay, well, this is not worth anyone's time. Alright, so we're done with that. Alright, so maybe we'll just leave it at that. I don't know. Is it worth doing the Miles Mathis thing? It just hurt my brain too, no doubt. Everybody's an idiot. Well, let's just see if there's any new comments. Ken is more of a technical guy. Well, I'd argue he's not very technical. I mean, obviously he hasn't technically detailed the function of the Faro cell at all. And he's lied about it, frankly. Alright, so let's do some of this Miles Mathis crap. Alright, so he just writes this all in kind of the negative way. Instead of making assertions, he just points out how other people's assertions are wrong. So, error 1, light travels via the ether. This was the theory up to the time of Einstein, and is still prevalent. Yes, etherists. They were all etherists, frankly. Maxwell, all of them, except for Newton. Newton and Einstein is all we got, who paused at the idea of wavicle. Yeah, it didn't appeal to those two. But it seems that everybody else was way on the wave wagon. Both are wrong, because light is the ether. So this is kind of a, oh, sure it is. Okay, so light is the ether. Yes, I'd say it's the elemental force. You could argue that it's made of the constituents that are elemental. But it just seems so obvious that photons are composite objects. You just can't rationally make them into anything else but something. They have to be made out of elements, just like a wave. If you believe it's a wave, it has to be more than one hump in the wave, right? I mean, the photon isn't just one hump of water, is it? Does that make any sense to you, that the whole photon is just the one bump? Alright. Light is both the background and the ether. Well, that doesn't make any sense, so... that's just kind of mushy talk, right? Light is both the background and the ether. You're just saying the ether is the background. Well, anyway. And everything travels relative to that. Well, that's true. That is what Einstein theories imply, though that fact is rarely stressed. Yes, I think Einstein is completely misinterpreted when he points out that the light is never changes. You can't fuck with it. You can't give it extra momentum. You can't take momentum away. You can't make light into something else. No matter what you do to the universe, you can never change what a light photon is doing. Just a fact. And somehow they bent that into him saying exactly the opposite. But anyway. Though they're stressed. Okay. Almost always relativity is used as a ditch, used to ditch the ether. Well, I mean, obviously, but it's the statement of relativity, the whole idea of bent space-time, a bent medium. It's kind of obvious that that's an ether. So anyway, but by building his theories around the constant C and having everything move relative to light, Einstein was showing that light was the ether. Well, light isn't the ether. The ether is called force, and it's the same stuff that makes gravity and magnetism. Light is just one variant. I mean, it's such an obvious variant. You know, you can imagine physics knows this stuff, and it's like, well, why should I even have to point this out? But I mean, they know that frogs see photons we don't see. So they know there's a whole bunch of these things called a photon in a form. You know, we need 6 of these things. You know, a frog needs maybe 4, you know. So we know that whether you think it's a wave or whatever you think it is, I mean, the idea is you need a certain amount of it. And so we know that it could be in, if a frog can see this much, well, what if it's broken even smaller? What if it's that much? Nobody's can see it then. But it's still momentum moving the speed of light. So, you know, this is a real subject, that the universe has a whole bunch of this energy in it, that we're just not seeing it. Right now, there's a whole bunch of microwaves flying by me, right? People's cell phone conversations are flying right past me right now. I don't see it. I don't feel it. I don't notice it. But it's real and it's there. So why can't there be a whole bunch of this stuff? I mean, that's the stuff that has regular ray length. That's the stuff in regular pieces, and I still can't see it. Just because its frequency isn't a frequency I can see. Just imagine how much of it could be in pieces. You know, pieces of a microwave, pieces of a gamma ray, pieces, you know, too small to be perceived. But there's still energy. And so, yeah, that's the medium of the universe. That's how everything communicates with everything. So if an electron's sitting over here and an electron's sitting over here, they know about each other, not by ESP or frickin' entanglement. They know about each other because there's energy hitting this one, and it bounces back and hits this one, and they know about each other. At the speed of light, they receive information. Everything knows where everything else is based on the speed of light, because that's what the energy, the heat, the everything that's radiating off of the thing, reflecting off of the thing constantly, is constantly bombarding me. I can see the cup over here, but I'm also technically, there's a whole bunch of other energy that's making me hotter, and I'm making him hotter. You know, by being in proximity to each other. We've created some noise between us, and that noise is irritating both of us. Now, we don't know it because it's so tiny amount of energy, but it's a real fact. All right, anyway. Well, right. Relative to Einstein was showing that light is the ether early on. Anyway, okay. Error 3A. I don't know what happened to 2. There can't be an ether. Anyway. Because if there were, it would cause refraction. This error goes all the way back to Kepler and before, but there would be refraction only if the ether were atomic or ionic. So again, now they're making the ether out of big stuff, which makes no sense at all. Look, the point is that you just don't need the superfluous ether. It doesn't serve a purpose. You don't need dominoes to explain how energy moves in the universe. You don't need to bang this into this and have it bang into that and bang into that and bang. You don't need the dominoes. You can just throw the dominoes. I want this domino to go from point A to point B. I just throw it. I don't need this superfluous, let's put a whole bunch of dominoes in between. The ether doesn't serve a purpose. You're just talking about momentum going from one place to another. Ether or no ether, what's the difference? What should be agreed upon is that there's a thing called momentum, and little pieces of momentum are all over the place in the universe, flying around. Every single square millimeter of space has a bunch of this energy passing through it. Who cares whether it's dominoes hitting dominoes or whether it's just a domino going from point A to point B? It's not the important fact. All right, anyway. The error goes all Kepler. The only substance of that sort is known to cause refraction. But light doesn't refract itself. Yes, it doesn't bang into itself. The forces, the ether, the movement, the momentum, doesn't interact with itself in any way that changes the universe. The universe only changes when the force hits an element of matter, because then the matter doesn't go exactly straight and the energy doesn't leave exactly straight, and that's when the universe changes. Where was I? Okay, so if the ether is photonic, no reflection would be expected. Well, it would be expected, but we can understand that, okay, it's inert. Either the bits never hit each other by some rule, or they hit each other and they basically, it doesn't make any difference. Their reflection looks exactly like missing. Alright, error 3b. The Michelson-Morley interferometer proved there's no ether. No, this interferometer proved nothing because it was a flawed instrument. Well, obviously, I would argue the whole theory of an interferometer is flawed. The whole theory of beam splitting is flawed. The whole idea of reflecting photons off mirrors and maintaining rational distances, being able to measure exact distances, is flawed, because you can't guarantee where the photon actually reflected from, how deep in the mirror it actually reflected. So yeah, lots of reasons to doubt. Based on a flawed diagram, it was generated to find a null outcome. Null outcomes are always tricky because they may be proof against a theory, or they may be the result of a flawed setup. Well, I think the very idea of assuming this ether stuff was thick is probably the wrong assumption. So I don't know. I mean, drag is a real subject, so I guess that's all it really is ether drag. Flawed setups always cause null outcomes, for many other flaws in the early years of this problem. Well, I'm just saying that the interferometers are obviously sensitive devices that can detect small amounts of movement, but small enough to detect the drag at the speed of light, well, that's another subject. Whether or not they have any hope of capturing those kind of small irregularities, when we can't even know when we emit light the exact point from which the light was emitted. I mean, did it come from, if I have a piece of metal glowing with heat, where did the little heat photon come from? The surface of the metal is expanding and is, distorted. How deep inside the metal did the photon actually come from? Alright, anyway. It's probably enough of this. I wonder where it happened to 2. Error 2 is gone. Yeah. Well, anyway, so yeah, light is a spin wave, so that's what he calls it, a spin wave. So that's pretty funny. It's bad enough he thinks it's waving. It's really funny that he thinks a wave can spin. So anyway, probably enough. I think it's enough. I'm tired, so I'll make it enough. Because I'll just say I'm tired. So it's a good enough reason to say it's enough. Alright, so till the next time and such. And yeah, we'll see where things go.